Good evening, anyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Hayden City Council chambers for the regular meeting of the Hayden City Council. Today is Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. Could I have a roll call of members, please, Abby?
Council President Roeder?
Yes.
Councilmember DePriest?
Yes.
Councilmember Satterfield?
Yes.
And Councilmember White?
Yes.
I'd like to ask Councilmember Roger Satterfield to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Members of council, do we have any additions or corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll proceed to item number 1, our consent calendar. Ladies and gentlemen, the city of Hayden does business 5 days a week. Most of the business that the city does requires no information from the city council whatsoever. However, there are some things that require the approval or the consent of city council before we can proceed with them. The items up on the consent calendar tonight are 1A, the approval of the amended July 21st, 2023 City Council special meeting minutes. 1B, the approval of the August 8th, 2023 City Council workshop minutes. 1C, the approval of the August 8th, 2023 City Council meeting minutes. 1D, the approval of appointment for Tim Turner to the Parks, Recreation, and Community Forestry Commission. 1E, the approval of the Hayden Area Regional Sewer Board wastewater treatment plant facility upgrades payment request. 1F, the approval of change order number 5 for the City Hall elevator and remodel project. 1G, the approval of the additional services with Architects West for the City Hall elevator and remodel project. 1H, the approval of the substantial completion letter for the City Hall elevator and remodel project. 1I, the approval of the special inspection and material testing with Geotech for Crawford Park expansion. 1J, the approval of the City Hall fire alarm system with Firetronics. 1K, the approval of PZE 23-0061, Revell LLC Comprehensive Plan Amendment and Zone Map Amendment Written Decision. 1L, the approval of Hayden Lake Marathon Event Permit Application, Support Agreement, and Loudspeaker Use Request. 1M, the ratification of bills paid for August 14th, 2023. And 1N, the approval of bills for payment. City Council has been given all of this information in advance and had a chance to look it over. Ladies and gentlemen of council, are there any questions or comments regarding our consent calendar?
Mr. Mayor, I was just wondering,
Member White.
is Tim Turner here tonight by any chance?
Mr. Turner here tonight?
He is not?
He
Okay.
is not.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion regarding the consent calendar.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Council President Roeder.
My motion is that we approve the consent calendar as written, 1A through 1N.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please. Abby?
Councilmember Satterfield?
Yes.
Councilmember White?
Yes.
Councilmember DePriest?
Yes.
And Council President Roeder?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 2 on our calendar tonight is the visitor and public comment period. If any of you would like to make any comments this evening other than what we have for the public hearings, I need to have you fill out a form at the back of the room and bring it up here and we can move. Okay, nobody's running for the back of the room here, so I'm going to say we have no public comment tonight. Item number 3, commission report. We have an update tonight from the Hayden Urban Renewal Agency Director, Ms. Melissa Cleveland. Melissa, it's nice to have you here tonight.
Yes, hello, can you hear me? Let's see if I can find it. So let's see. I think under here. Okay, so this should be pretty quick. Just to give a quick overview and a reminder that Hayden Urban Renewal Agency was created in 2005, and it will mature in 2029. So there are 704 acres, and I put a map there. Everything in blue is currently in the district. And then the value, I put on there the valuation. So the properties within the district are about 6.76% of the total city's valuation, in case you were wondering. This is the current board. Our chair is Rhonda Mitchell, and then the vice chair is Randy McIntyre. Then we also have Steve Meyer, Michael Thayer, Colin Meehan, Joy Richards, and Matt Roeder. So I would try to think of things that would be of interest to the city. And this year in 2023, HURA assisted the city with several different projects. The City Hall remodel, the Ramsey Road sewer design, the Ramsey Road sewer construction, and I don't think we've reimbursed anything for that yet, but it's coming. And then the Crawford Park expansion, same thing. I don't think we've reimbursed anything yet, but it's under construction. And so it's about $1.5 million that HURA has provided the city for assistance in 2023. And then in the past, HURA has contributed to several other items, including the Government Way and Miles intersection design, the Government Way corridor study, Hayden Avenue construction, and public art. And I'm sure there's more than that, but those are the big ticket items that came to mind. And then our statistics in a nutshell. So just moving forward to fiscal year 2024, we're anticipating that we'll have about $4.5 million in the bank. And then we're estimating about another $1 million in revenue for 2024. And then our expenses, we have about $160,000 in general expenses. And then we've budgeted $4.5 million for city infrastructure projects and or property purchases. And those aren't necessarily specifically allocated. They're kind of just placeholders for now so that HURA can respond to needs that might be out there. So we also own property, and so I've highlighted it in orange. That's a parcel, like 1.7 acres on Orchard that we rent currently because HURA picked it up a few years back and there hasn't been a specific thing to do with it yet. And then also those two parking lots that are in green, kind of south of the old Owl Cafe on Government Way are also owned by HURA. We also have quite a few obligations to make you aware of, and these are owner participation agreements. And what those are is people that are developing property and need public infrastructure to do so, they can come and ask HURA for reimbursement for some of that public infrastructure. So we have 4 on the books currently, and there's the oldest one is the H6 basin, and that was for a sewer line kind of out towards Odom and the Lancaster Market, that area. And we're almost paid up on that one. So we just have a little bit more. We're thinking either fiscal year 2024 or 2025, that one will be completed. There's the Chubbs one, which was the frontage improvements for the apartments that went in on Hayden Avenue, kind of next door to Capone's. We haven't reimbursed them anything yet, but the promissory note is all executed and everything. So kind of the next tax cycle, we'll start reimbursing them their increment. And then we've got 2 others. Rock Properties is also up kind of by the Lancaster Market. It's that whole area kind of south and west of Lancaster Market, that subdivision that went in. And that one, We are almost to the point of executing the promissory note. So that one hasn't been signed yet, but we're real close. We've gone through the cost verification and everything. And then Marketplace at Miles, that was at the southeast corner of Government Way and Miles. There was some building demolition that occurred there, and they haven't submitted their costs yet. So we're kind of in limbo waiting to do the cost verification on that one. So just as a reminder, Hayden URA normally reimburses 75% of the increment generated on the property within the agreement. So if, like Rock Properties, for instance, the max they can get is 1.6 million. But that would mean that they would have to generate that much increment in the next few years. So if they did, and they just, developed like crazy, and so property values went way up, and we were able to collect a lot of increment, then 75% of the increment would go back to them. But I think it's probably unlikely that they'll get all of that.
But
Oh, yeah.
go back, would you be kind enough to explain what an owner participation agreement is? There's a lot of people that watch this, and it might be helpful if.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's an agreement that kind of documents what the Hayden Urban Renewal Agency will reimburse them for. And this has pretty much always been public infrastructure. So frontage improvements, which means like widening the road, adding curbs and sidewalks and things like that. So it's mostly that type of work. And then also some of the agreements have been like demolishing deteriorated structures. I know Chubb's had one, like an old building that needed to come down to be able to build the apartment. So if it's stuff like that that helps improve the area, yeah.
And when you say reimbursement, these are tax dollars from that property that is collected. You call that increment.
Yes.
And increment, a lot of people don't know what that,
Okay, let me explain that.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I think it's really helpful to let the public know what these terms mean, so that when we talk about it, they got a better handle.
Right. So at the time that HURA was established in 2005, the tax value, the assessed value on the property gets sort of frozen, and that's called the base. So whatever a piece of property that's within the district was valued out at that time, that's the base, and then anything that the valuation grows beyond that is the increment. So it's how far they've grown in value since the base was set. So property that is exactly the same as it was in 2005, it will have grown a little bit, but not very much. But property that was maybe vacant and now has a commercial building on it, that would have a much higher value, and so it generates a lot more increment. That makes sense? Yes.
It says reimburses, so the developer is responsible for paying up front for all of the work, and then after the work is done, they submit for reimbursement.
Yeah, and they don't, there's no guarantee.
They have to prove their costs and all that?
Yeah, so they have to submit a whole package proving their costs, their invoices, canceled checks, everything that kind of proves that they incurred the costs for the items that HURA agreed to reimburse for. So then my staff goes through all of that and confirms all the costs are legit. And then there's never a guarantee that they get the maximum amount, because it is only generated off of the increment that their own property generates.
Right.
And it's only 75% of that increment. It's not even all of it, so. Yes.
What kind of buildings were on the Chubb's property?
They are apartment buildings.
No, that were taken down.
It was before my time, but I think that there was I think there was an old hotel that was in really rough shape that was on there. Donna might remember, our historian.
It was a really rough, old manufactured home park that had really fallen into disrepair. And then there was like apartments. It was a hotel, but it got converted into apartments that were like 3, I think, back there,
Yeah.
that were in that building that got removed.
If I may make a comment, let's just, about the rock properties. That 1.68 million, if the developer got the maximum amount, that is actually tax dollars that go back to the development to pay for that infrastructure.
Right. And that one's a little bit different because there were a lot of new public streets and stuff that went in. And so that's why it's a lot more. It's not just frontage improvements on rock properties. It's the streets in the.
And if that
Development.
property were located outside the urban renewal district, the developer would have to pay for all that infrastructure. No
yeah,
tax money
that's correct. I mean,
would be given to that developer. So the advantage to being in the urban renewal district, if they want to put an OPA together, is that they get tax dollars that are paying for what other contractors or developers outside the district pay for.
that's correct. And again, it's the tax dollars that they generate on their own property. So it's not somebody else's tax dollars going to them. Any more questions on the OPAs? Okay, so I think my last slide is just that in 2003, HURA did go through an exercise to see if it was possible that expansion of the district could occur and stay within the state limitations. And I won't go into all of that, but there's different percentages of valuation and area that you can go up by in one time that you can expand, and determine that it looked like HURA could. So in May, HURA asked council to consider a feasibility study to expand the district. And so blue on this map is the existing district, and then the little green pockets are where the HURA board was recommending to expand into. And the primary objective for expanding would be to be able to assist the city with the infrastructure projects at intersections, purchasing park property, that kind of thing. That's why the expansion was considered. So we're still really interested in having the city consider that.
And that would just be within the existing district, which, as you say, matures in 2029. It's not a new district.
Not a new district, no, and it wouldn't, so there's certain limitations, and you want to stay under those limitations when you do an expansion. You only get to do it once, and if you stay under the limitations, then it doesn't reset the base. So the base is still, from 2025, or 2005. So that we were able, with these areas that are in green, we'd be able to stay under both the criteria and wouldn't have to reset the base.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember White.
Yes, thank you. I'm really glad that you're here today because I have some unanswered questions. And so this is the question time. I have 9 questions to be exact. So I submitted some questions to the City of Hayden and also to the Urban Renewal District. It was in your June 12th meeting, but I still haven't received official answers from these questions. I'm trying to be precise in my knowledge of urban renewal so I can explain it to my constituents. So I'd like to go ahead and read these questions right now. Number 1, if the council decides to allow HURA to grow, am I correct in assuming that the chosen properties will have to be declared as deteriorated by the council? I'm not expecting answers to these right now. I would like them in writing, but I hope to have them soon. The second one is, which definitions of deteriorated apply in our situation? Number 3, will we send out legal notices to the property owners before declaring them as deteriorated? Number 4, What are some of the effects on a property being in the district? Number 5, what will the base rate be of the new properties for taxes? Number 6, will there be a public hearing before declaring private property as deteriorated? Number 7, if we decide to let HURA grow in order to fix intersections and purchase a park, will we be able to have a contract with HURA that limits them to doing just those projects on the property and nothing else? Also, as part of the process, can we have legal agreement with HURA that guarantees they won't request the use of eminent domain in Hayden? That was question number 8. And number 9, what is the process or timeline we're looking at for the whole 10% growth process? So I'm disappointed that these questions haven't been answered in a more timely manner. I don't think these are really difficult questions, but the lack of response causes concern, and I hope to have answers to these questions soon so I can answer my constituents. Thank you.
May I ask a question of council? Possibly they can answer it. The term must be identified as deteriorated. Is that the only criteria?
No, there's more criteria.
Yeah, there's more than just that criteria for
But
whether,
these questions are directed at
I'm sorry.
HURA for a written response from them. And so that's up to their legal counsel to
Okay,
determine
I'm sorry.
when and how those questions will
Right.
be
Melissa, am I
responded to.
correct then? Do you know if because I know that discussion did come up at a HURA meeting a while back.
There's a laundry list of
Right.
criteria, and I think in the memo that we submitted, or the letter that we submitted in May, goes into quite a bit of detail on that, all that, so you could review that letter again. I didn't bring it, I don't have the definition in
not a
front of me, but
necessity.
there's maybe like 14 different things.
It's not a necessity to declare it as blighted or deteriorated solely.
Yes, it is.
No, I'd agree that it's not. I mean, there's quite a few different criteria.
Yeah, thank you.
And then I just want to point out that HURA cannot expand itself. That's why we've requested the city to do so. So it would be city that would go through the process, and it would be the city that would determine the feasibility and all of that process. So, anyway.
Mayor, I want to ask a question to you. Is that my understanding is that, and if you know the answer to this, that HURA can't exercise eminent domain, but only the city council or the city of Hayden can.
That is correct.
Yeah,
So-
that's my
Statutorily.
understanding.
So that, you don't have to worry about what if they would do that, but we have that power, if you will, or that option to exercise, but not HURA.
And I haven't heard HURA having any interest in taking on their own projects. Like generally, it's been the city's doing a project and they come to HURA to request assistance with the finances. So I would imagine infrastructure projects moving forward would be the same model. And so it's a city project that HURA agrees by contract, we write a contract to assist the city with. So it's not going to be HURA projects.
Do we have other questions from council? Well, Melissa, thank you very much for coming and giving us that update. We appreciate that very much, and we always appreciate HURA's participation particularly when the city needs money. The next item on our agenda, item number 4A, is the 2023 fee schedule update. City Administrator Brett Boyer. Brett, would you like to give an introduction to that?
Yeah, on an annual basis, and sometimes more frequently as needed.
Excuse me for just a moment. First of all, this is a public hearing, and it is city initiated, and under the city initiated public hearing, the staff will present, and then the council will ask staff questions. The public will be called on to comment, and then the council can ask the public questions. Then I will close the hearing and have deliberations. It is 5:25. Mr. Boyer, can you give us an introduction, please?
Yeah, sure. So we look at the fees at least annually, and usually around the time we do the budget. And so we go to the departments and have them review their fees to see if they're still reasonable or if they need to be adjusted to cover the cost of the services that we provide. And so in this case, there were some that were more than 5%. And so when we have fees that are more than 5%, it requires a public hearing. And so we had that this evening. In the packet and online, there were 2 documents that were available for the council and for the public. One of them, it had a summary, had a memo outlining which ones, and a summary of the fees that we're looking to modify. And then the other one is the resolution and all of the fees. And so we have a lot of fees that we just keep in the resolution that we're looking to have just reapproved in the resolution. The areas that we have primarily the changes in are in the community development area. Most of them are related to Donna's area, and I'm going to, in a minute, have her maybe just give a short review. One of the areas I wanted to point out, we've talked about this through the budget process prior, is the sewer fees. The operations and maintenance fees, we have a 5-year plan that our consultant gave us that we needed to increase those fees to be able to run the enterprise fund. And so this year, we're continuing on, and we've asked the council to do that. We've included in the budget that it would be a $2.50 per month increase for the sewer O&M costs. And so the bi-monthly is basically for 2 months, and it's a $5 increase. So I wanted to point that one out, just so that's one that the public usually sees or maybe wants to comment on. The other 2 areas are a lot shorter or smaller. One of them is our recreation fees, and I wasn't going to have Susie make a presentation. She usually looks at those fees and increases them incrementally as we go along, and those are to cover program costs as we have increases to those programs. The other areas in public works, there's a few in relation to Allen's area, and those are in there. Probably the most significant increase, and most of these are related to developer costs, like a lift station review was a little, as far as like the pass-through cost was significantly higher. And then the load limit area, which is required to protect our roads during the winter months. So with that, I just wanted to give a highlight of some of the fees. Many of these are already in place, and then Donna's area, I wanted her, since there were so many, to address what and why. A lot of them are just wording changes, so.
So periodically we go through the fee schedule and kind of do a check and balance just to make sure that we're collecting fees that cover our time that that staff spends on those. So over the course of the last 2 years, my staff has been kind of keeping track of how long it takes them to do various processes. And we compiled all of that information for each of the processes and then looked at our fees. And then we also quantified that by looking at other jurisdictions around us, Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Rathdrum, to see how our fees currently and what we kind of thought they really needed to be to cover our costs, and to see if we were kind of in the scope of where other folks are at. A couple of things that, as Brett pointed out, load limits take a lot longer to process than people think they do, because there's paper documents or electronic documents. And people think that when you go electronic, that all that filing goes away. It just comes in a different medium. You're still got the same amount of documents that you're processing, but now you're doing it electronically. So we kind of looked at that. That's one of the things we really wanted to see, is if we were saving time or if we needed to address that. And part of the other jurisdictions actually charge a load limit fee on a per trip basis. We're not proposing that. We're proposing it a one-time fee that covers administration costs and the time that Dan and Wade spend on the phone saying, yes, you can take a half load, or no, you need to take a quarter load, or yes, you can take a, whatever, all year for the whole season. So it's just a one-time fee, not every trip. I wanted to point that out. The rest of the fees, as Brett said, most of them have to do with just trying to make the fees more clear and uniform. Our fee schedule's 8 pages long, generally speaking, and it gets confusing, and so we try to keep that clear and concise. There was questions previously. We've heard lots of concerns about the appeal or request for reconsideration process. And we recognize that there's 2 different processes and 2 different amounts of time associated with those, whether it's an appeal based on a administratively and staff interpretation, doesn't require a public hearing, still requires staff time to get ready for that, versus all the public noticing that's required in a public hearing, posting public notice boards, legal notices, all of that. So we broke that fee apart based on that time allotted to that. And so that's a change. And really, the other thing that was noticeable is that when we added a second public hearing to the public hearing process for zone maps and comprehensive plans and et cetera, we didn't account for that. We didn't add any dollar amounts into that for that second amount of public hearing process that goes along with that. And so that's reflected in those fees that are addressed. And there were a couple of fees that actually shifted downward based on the fact that we had been outsourcing engineering for a while, and then our engineer came in-house and his fees kind of came with him. But then we recognized that maybe that needed to be adjusted, and so we accounted for that change in here as well. So we really tried to have it reflect what we're doing.
Okay, thank
I
you.
will stand for questions.
Council members, questions?
I have one.
Mr. Satterfield. Mr.
Hey,
Mayor.
Donna, I think this is just a clerical error, but under planning and engineering development fees, site plans, 3 to 5 acres, the last one, it has, I think the comma's in the wrong place.
I would agree.
Okay,
Yep.
that's all I have now.
Just, go ahead.
A couple
Mr.
of,
Roeder.
yeah, thank you, Mayor. Under impact fees, I'm a little confused here, and I'm sure there's a really good answer, but
Yeah.
it's $1.28 per square foot of conditioned space, and the next one is $1,623
Yeah.
per square foot of conditioned space.
I read that too this morning, going, there's something wrong with that.
Are those,
So what this is trying to say, and I think it probably needs to be moved to the other column where it says, what it's trying to say is that if you have a house that is 1,400 square feet, it's saying, and you have less than, you say you have 900 square feet of that are conditioned and 500 square feet that are in the garage. I don't know how big your garage is, so I'm throwing that out. That this would actually have a fee that fits into the less than 1,000 square foot column because the garage isn't conditioned space. And so we're trying to figure out how to capture that. So if you guys have a solution, I'll fix it.
when I read it, I go,
Yeah, it's
whoa.
confusing, yes.
And I imagine the public, when they look at that, they're going, wow, too. So-
Yeah, so we were trying to figure out how to clarify it, but I don't think this does it.
Okay. And then the second item, if I may, and this will be addressed to Brett, is on the last page on the monthly sewer rate for residential and commercial. At what point do we pay off the cost of the NIBC lawsuit? I thought it was 5 years. Are we still going to be paying for it this coming year, or did it?
This coming year, and then the following year, we're done.
Okay,
So
so
it
we
won't
won't-
be on the next budget year, but
Okay,
it is
so
this
we
year.
don't see the reduction here.
No.
Okay,
Next year.
That's all I had. Thank you.
And I was just going to mention, because we were going through the impact fees, that as you know, the impact fee committee just recently met, and they have a proposal that has to go through a separate public hearing, and so that'll
Next
probably
meeting,
hit at the next month. And so so these impact fees really aren't changing in this version, but the impact fees will be coming by themselves the next meeting. So just a FYI.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Mr. DePriest?
Mr. Roeder asked my question about the litigation.
Okay.
Sorry.
Other questions from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. White, I'm sorry.
Oh, I have a question about the sewer monthly rate being raised by $2.50 a month. Could you please explain, could someone explain the reasons why we're raising it that much, that amount?
I mean, the short answer is because the consultant looked at long-term, what our needs were to pay off the debt on, the phase two, to basically run our sewer collection system. And as you look at the increases and costs over the next while, she came up with a 5-year plan to keep us on track. We've signed a contract for her to come in and relook at everything and make sure that we're still on track. But the short answer is, because the consultant has told us to be able to maintain our system, we need to continue to increase those fees. And the fact that we've had cost of living increases last year and this year at higher than what was reviewed by the consultant, they're going to take a look at that and see if we're still on track, or if we're behind, or if we're ahead. So hopefully we're ahead, but we'll see. Does that answer your question? And without getting, I mean, we've got a report from them that goes into more detail, but that's the gist of it. We have this 5-year plan, and we're just following the consultants. It's a financial plan for our enterprise system that is separate from our general fund and has to be self-sustaining. And so that's why we do a separate financial plan for that system.
Is this financial plan available for the public to see?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments to staff? Okay. At this point, we're going to open this up for public comment. If anyone would like to make a public comment regarding this, please fill out a form at the back. Your comments are limited to 5 minutes. At the 4-minute mark, I will wave a piece of paper to let you know you've got approximately 1 minute left. And at this point, the only commenter that we have is Mr. Gary McCollum. Mr. McCollum, if you would head up to the podium there, I'd appreciate that.
I'm kind of new to this, so bear with me if I go out of my lane. I just, I was a little concerned when I got the notice that the sewer fees were going up. And, it didn't say exactly how much they were going up, it just said they were going up. And I was like, when I first saw, we moved here from the Spokane Valley, and their rates were so much lower, and they were still paying for the whole city being put onto sewers as opposed to septic, and their rates were lower. So I was kind of shocked when I saw the rates here of 55, and then when I read the story about, somebody goofed somewhere in the city and didn't, charge the contractors the right fees for connecting to sewers, and then they got sued by the contractors. I was like, that's somebody's mistake. Why are we paying for somebody on the city hall's mistake? Like, that doesn't make sense. So our rates just seem so much out of proportion to what they really should be. So we're all being asked to tighten our budgets because of Bidenomics. Why aren't we asking the city to tighten their budget on all of their things like sewers and everything else? At least for the time being, until things turn around in our economies. That's really all I had.
As long as since council is also allowed to ask the public questions, just to clarify, Mr. Boyer, could you tell us how much a month are citizens paying to pay off that lawsuit, the legal fees incurred in that lawsuit?
It's $7.
$7 per month? Is that it?
What?
Is it?
How much in the monthly fee goes towards the lawsuit.
So it'd be $350 per month. It's
$3.50 per month.
bi-monthly.
If you have any questions about how all of that business worked out, by all means, come by City Hall, speak with our city clerk or our city administrator about that. But you are correct. The city taxpayers are paying off the settlement with the North Idaho Building Contractors Association, and it's $3.50 a month. And the fee they were talking about a moment ago is going to end as of next year, that the settlement will be finished.
That 350 is going to end next year.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
But then we're going to be raised 250, so it's really going to go backwards $1.
That's correct. Yes, sir, you're right.
You got it. But I would invite you to come talk with me. I can talk about the lawsuit and kind of give you some background. It was, started in 2012 was when they filed, so it was going a long time, and kind of what and why. And I can even go through the background information from the consultant. And it also, if you compare our fees with those in the area, we're actually probably on the lower side at $55 per month. So I didn't do a lot of the comparison in Washington, but if you compare with those entities in our area, we're on the lower side at $55 per month. So.
Wow.
You are clearly an informed individual, and we would love to have an opportunity just to sit down and talk with you about how that all worked out.
Sure. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. If we have no other comments, I am closing this hearing at 5:41. At this point, council deliberation. Comments or discussion from council? Well, I have something that I would like council to consider. Do you have something, Mr. Satterfield? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if this is out of order or not, but just a little, the gentleman who got up here, or can we address that somewhat, or am I
Public
out of
hearing's
bounds?
closed.
I believe the hearing's closed, so
Okay.
the time's
All right.
passed for that.
Never mind then.
You can talk with him privately.
Oh, yeah, I'd
during the
love
break or
to.
afterwards.
Love to. We get the short end of the stick.
Other items of discussion from council? I would like council to consider one change in this. The planning department has carefully monitored the amount of money it costs them to do the various things on this fee schedule. And I have no doubt under the appeal or the request for reconsideration to city council, the current fee is $440, and I have no doubt that the fee of $850 is well supported. I don't deny that a bit. However, I would ask council to consider the fee jump for the average individual. $440 is still pretty steep, but in an attempt to preserve our working with the general public and their opportunity to question things that council has done, I suggest that council consider leaving the request for reconsideration with the city council public hearing at $440. I have no doubt that it costs us that much money, but $850 is a lot of money for the average citizen to pony up when they believe the council may have made a wrong decision.
Question is, how many, out of curiosity, do we have an idea of how many appeal requests for reconsiderations do we have in a year? Do we have 5, 10, 3, 2?
4 or 5, probably. 4 or 5, probably.
Thank you.
Did I hear correctly, I guess, maybe, that the almost doubling was because of the 2 hearings that we're now having that had nothing to do with it?
No, it just has to do with the amount of time it takes for, I mean, it's not, you're accounting for all of the people that are participating in a process. So these are, how much time does it take for somebody to write the notices? How much time does it take somebody to put the, envelopes together and do the mailings? How much time does it take somebody to go out and post the property? How much time does it take you know, in a meeting, how much time does it take prepping for a meeting? How much time does it take writing the decision after the meeting? I mean, there's a lot of people involved in that conversation.
Kind of along the line is, and this is, I don't know any other way to call it, but is there a hardship appeal potential for something like that? For people, you know, if they can demonstrate financial inability or whatever, you know, whatever I'm trying to put together, some way that there could be consideration given to people who may struggle.
Like a fee waiver?
That's one way to put it, yeah.
That's why we have to.
At this late stage, is that something that could be even done? I mean,
Well, that's just, I mean, it's just
right.
3 minutes of discussion, just,
Well,
everybody's going like this.
You wouldn't, I mean, you would determine what you want to do with the fee, and then you would give direction to staff to, there's no fee waiver process at the city now. So if you want a process developed, that
You'd
would
have to
be.
create a, yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. White?
I agree with you on this idea of keeping it at $440. How would we do this? Is this a motion that we make when we pass this along?
To the best of my knowledge, the motion would be made to approve the fee schedule with the exception of the request for reconsideration, city council public hearing. That would be the way that we would, should council so choose, that would be the way that we would initiate the situation.
So if I've got this right, if there were only, say, 5 appeal requests, yeah, so instead of being 850, it's 450, we're looking at a loss of about $2,000 for the year, I guess is average.
Rough number.
There was a rough number, as the question is. And I understand with inflation and the cost of doing business, I mean, we have to increase some fees. I do think that's high.
Yeah.
It sets the wrong message too. I mean, we you know, it doesn't look fair when you double it almost.
Not that it's not justified.
Right. I'm just saying that that's a shocker. And if it could be more accessible for the average individual, I'm sure developers have no problems paying that, but I guess the concern would be for that individual that would have to pony up the money to appeal. That high number could restrict that individual or individuals from filing an appeal because it's just too much money. And I think that's what you're getting at, Mayor, was we want it more accessible for people. So I agree with the mayor.
Other comments or discussion? At this point, I would entertain a motion regarding the 2023 fee schedule update.
Mayor, I'd make the motion to accept the 2023 fee schedule update with the following change of appeal request for reconsideration to stay at $440, and also under 3 to 5 acres, the comma be moved to the proper place.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion from council?
Mayor, the only discussion I
Yes, sir, Mr.
like is, I know that Donna was saying that they want to rework, and I don't know if that should be in the motion or we just direct staff to go ahead and clean it up, so we don't need that in the motion. I just want for clarification.
Yeah, we'll just direct staff to do that. Does not need to be a part of the motion. We have a motion and a second with any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Councilmember White,
Yes.
Council President Roder,
Yes.
Councilmember DePreez.
Yes.
And Councilmember Satterfield.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item 4B, the fiscal year 2024 budget. This is also a public hearing, and as it is a city-initiated public hearing, it will follow the same rules. Mr. Boyer, are up. and our new city treasurer, Natasha Lang, is up too. The time is 5:49.
I wanted to introduce Natasha Lang as well. She's fairly new, but we wanted to give her a chance to jump right in on she did a great job assisting with the last part of the budget. And so she has a part in here as well as we go through this. Wanted to start off with just going through and reminding the council and the public the process that we go through for preparing and establishing the budget. We start usually in April. We start with department heads as they have, we meet together and look at the needs that they may have, and so that they can all hear what those needs are amongst each other. So they understand that if maybe this year one can't get this and the other maybe can get it because they have a greater need, we have that discussion. We have a council strategic planning session where they get together, they hear what the departments are proposing, and they discuss their priorities, and we look at goals and working through, based on the budget, what we're looking at for the next year. Then we take that information that the council has worked on in this council retreat, and then we take that back to the department heads and say, okay, here's the information from the council, now prepare your budgets. And then they prepare their budgets. We go through that and come up with a draft budget. And then we engage the council again with that draft budget and go through budget work sessions with them that are public meetings. And this year we had 3, and a couple of the prior years we had 2, but we went through and had further discussions. On the 21st, we did have to set a special meeting to approve the draft budget. And then from that draft budget, we put in the paper notice twice this draft budget. And then today is where we are beginning the public hearing on this process, and that was noticed quite some months ago as far as the date of this public hearing. We'll discuss a little further. We have an extra step that we want to talk about as far as the budget. As far as continuing the public hearing to our next meeting, and we'll explain why in a minute. These are the steps this evening we just want to go through in short manner. The first one is in the draft budget meeting we discussed, we always get, after we've set our draft budget, we get additional information from the county on what the property tax valuations are, and we work through what's called an L2. And so I'm going to let, at this point, Natasha take and talk about this part.
If you remember on the previous slide, they talked about the dates that we go through all that information. And the last meeting that we had where we looked at that information was July 21st. And on August 7th, we received information from the county giving us some of that updated information we needed in order to incorporate into our final budget. And the process is such that whatever you put in your tentative approval that the council accepts on that July 21st meeting, we cannot submit a budget that is anything more than that amount. And so Brett did a great job estimating what that number should be to try to be as accurate as we could, but give us that little bit of wiggle room so that as we got that information at a later date from the county, we could include it and still meet all of the requirements that we have to adhere to in approving and passing a budget. And so that number came in about $5,000 less than what we had estimated. And that is what we like and what we want. And so that's the information we received. We incorporated that. That's a process called the L2. And that worksheet gives us the maximum property tax dollars amount allowed that our district may levy. And so that was that. It's a very important information. So that's the information we got. We've incorporated that. And then we got some new information after that.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Just move. So step 2 is to talk about the notice and then the budget overview. So let's go to the next slide. That's your step 1. Okay. So the reason why we sent out an email to the council, We did something this year that not many cities, in fact, I don't think we've
I
found
didn't
one
find
that
that number. Yeah.
has done a base budget increase before. So for the law enforcement, it was something new that we had to incorporate in our budget. And so when our budget, if you went online and saw the budget numbers, none of them have changed. But when we published it, we put the base budget increase in this second line item. So when you look at this was the notice that was in the paper. And so I want you to focus in, there was two numbers that we were concerned with that we want to republish so that there's good transparency to the public to understand where that money is. We could perhaps just move forward and approve this, but I think we talked amongst ourselves and said, let's err on the side of transparency and being open. Let's continue our public hearing and renotice it in case there's any questions. So I'm going to walk you through just a couple things here. So underneath, and I'm sorry to get both of these on, I know those numbers are a little bit small, but this area here was what was published. And so under the revenue side, if you see here, now I'm going to move over. This is what was published, where it says FY 2024 proposed revenues. We had our standard property tax with our 3% and new construction. That's what this 1,941,000 was. We put the base budget increase into the other general fund. And so the total amount is the same. That's why the amount that we published, the total amount, the 39 million, it really is correct, and the budget is all the same. But we talked with the state afterwards, and their suggestion was that we move the base budget increase into the property tax levy general fund area and renotice it. And so that's why when you look up here at the 2479, any of you that looked at the full document, you'll see that again that the number is the same. And so for transparency, we want to put the amount that we were requesting for the sheriff override into the property tax here. So it's the first time we've done this. We received that information that we should put it in there. And so we want to renotice, start the hearing tonight, renotice over the next couple weeks, and on the September 12th meeting, continue and take public comment. So that was our step 2. We adjusted according to the new information we got from the county. That's in there. Talked about the renoticing. And then tonight, what we thought we'd do is just still go through the budget highlights, what's in the budget. And then at the next meeting, we can take public comment. So if there's 3 actions tonight that we would be asking the council. We don't want to approve the appropriations ordinance tonight. What we'd ask you for is to continue our public hearing to the September 12th, to give instruction and permission to republish the budget in the paper. And then third is to request from the county an extension for what we need to give to them. So those 3 things are the actions we'd like to see tonight. So with that, just some budget highlights. We just have a couple pages that we want to go through, and we've done this before. So in the budget, and we were able to adjust the 3% in new construction with the numbers that the county gave us. So our 3% increase is about $55,000, and our new construction amount is basically the new construction plus our levy rate, gives us about $96,000 in an increase in our budget. The total new property tax base amount was $1,935,746,000 with the sheriff base budget increase is the $543. That's where we get the $2.496 million. So that gives you an idea on the property tax, what we're doing. The health benefits, actually, the increase was less than last year. Last year was 12.5%. This year is 6.1%, which is actually a reasonable increase. Not that we want to see any increase, but that's better than what we've seen in the past. The total general fund main budget is just over 8 million. And in that, we had in there to keep up with cost of living, there was a 5% salary increase and a merit increase of 1%. And so that's built in, trying to keep our pay rates commensurate. We're kind of, we're going to be doing another analysis. We're still behind Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls significantly as far as what we pay, but we try to stay in the ballpark so we don't lose folks. Some of the other highlights in the budget, just generally approximately 10% increase in our fuel costs. Adding full-time parks maintenance worker and an engineering tech. The ARPA money, that is, it's basically like COVID money. It's the federal dollar money that we received. It's already here. We received 3.3 million and we've budgeted to use part of that for roads. Right now it's in the budget to help with the Honeysuckle and Ramsey project, and then 2 million for to help with the H6 sewer project. We received a large increase in road money this year. The state had a surplus and they basically were giving back to cities, actually in multiple ways that they were giving back money. But the amount that we budgeted last year was a little over 800,000, and this year we're up to 1.268. All of the increase from the state that we received has to be used for road projects. And so next year, we will see a substantial amount of road projects, primarily like overlays or even some milling and repaving in the roads that are the worst. And all of that just went into increase in the road program project line items. We increased snow plowing some. We had increases in McElroy and other requirements for doing our snow plowing. We have in there the second payment for the Lakes Highway District, upstairs elevator remodel, because it's not going to be done until next year. We had to put a little bit of money to budget to finish paying off that project. Water truck. Other highlights, and we've already talked about including the sewer operation and maintenance increase as given to us from FCS, which is the consultant. We increased to the sheriff up to 1.07 million. Last year we had budgeted 700,000, and that included for them to add 3 additional deputies. We are still working on the contract. You should have, did you pass that out? So the draft contract, you can give it to them after. I wanted to give you what we're working on. We've given it to the sheriff's department. They've had it for about a week. At the back of that, I want you to look at, they've asked us to do a 5-year plan on the sheriff piece. That 5-year plan is separate from the contract, but you can take that home, and if you have any questions or comments on the contract, let us know. We're not asking for approval or anything. It's just, we're going down that path and we thought, let's give it to you so you can be looking at it and give us any comments. Capital improvement plan, that's on here. It will be on shortly. And then some equipment pieces, larger pieces of equipment that we have in there, a mower, a grader, and a forklift purchase for this year. And then we've got projects in this, under the sewer funds. We've got various projects. I won't go through those that are related to O&M and also on the capital side. So those are just, again, highlight. We've gone through budget before. I didn't want to spend a ton of time on it. And if anybody wants to see these, you can see where the budget as far as this year, our percentages.
Could you take a question from Councilmember White?
I have a question on the slide previous. Could you tell me again, number 12, how much is that increase to the sheriff?
So from this year's budget to there, it's a little over 300,000. So 300 and, it's actually 377,000.
So is that 1 million?
Yeah, it's 1,077,000.
What's the 1?
What's a what? Oh, it's just at the end, the one?
It's 1.077.
It's 1.0771
Million.
Okay.
So the total amount in the contract, in the budget is 1,077.
100.
Okay, thank you.
Is that 197?
197.
That extra digit threw me off.
So it's a little over 300,000 increase as we put the base budget amount in that the public approved for us to increase to 10 to pay for 10 designated officers.
If I may, a follow-up question. You're saying the increase is 300 some thousand?
Yeah.
But on our page 1, we're showing sheriff base budget of increase of $543,843.
Correct.
They added last year.
So so what's your question?
Well, I'm hearing an increase of a different amount that when I'm seeing on the budget of 500 some thousand. Could you
So
explain
part of that, as you recall, in our last meeting, as we went through, we agreed, because to get to the 10 officers, to have enough vehicles, we agreed as a one-time amount to pay, I think it's 160,000 additional so that they could get 2 additional cars. So in the base budget amount, we had enough to purchase 1 car each year. And we already had 4 cars. Not all of them will be on the streets. So we agreed next year we would be buying 3 cars. That will give us 7. One of those is a school resource officer that doesn't need the same type of vehicle. And one of them will be partially like a detective. And then another one will already have a car and will be a kind of like a variable officer that they can appoint. So the amount to get to the $1,077,000 includes a one-time amount to catch up on cars, to purchase 2 additional cars that we were taking out of our fund. So the math's not, just know that the 543,000 is in there, separate. We also were paying an amount, prior to, so with the 160, the 543, and what we were paying prior to that, it adds up to the 1,077,000. And I had when we went through that, I had a slide that showed all that breakdown. I didn't bring it tonight, but I
And
can show that to
on
you.
one side is a revenue stream. So that 543 is revenue coming in that's going to help offset that total cost of the 1.077
077.
million. So the money coming in is going to help, it made our budget higher in order to help fund those expenses. So that when we say increase, that increase was we're just specifically talking about the expense line increase from last year's budget. We weren't accounting for the additional revenues that might be coming in to offset that.
So my question then would be, do we show on the expense side of this budget 1.0771?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that clarifies.
Here,
That's all I wanted.
If you've got your budget,
Yeah,
It's
that-
on page 3,
Page 3, okay.
almost
page 3 of 41.
90% of the way down.
So at the bottom of the general operating administrative, it's got
I can see
county
it.
sheriff, 1,077,197. And when I go to the next slide, you'll notice, actually on the expenditures, for law enforcement, that's higher because we also include the prosecution services of 70,000 in there. So so the prosecution services plus the sheriff's department add up to the total law enforcement, but good question. This just lets you know on our revenue side for the general fund, our largest amount is the property tax coming in. Our sales tax is next. Highway distribution this year is significantly higher. And then you've got some smaller, our building fees, the liquor distribution money from the state, recreation programs, franchise fees, all of those. That's what makes up our general fund revenue. And then on the expenditure side, the The largest amount goes to Public Works, the streets area, law enforcement next, and then general administration, which is, finance, it's finance, engineering, finance, clerk, HR, all of those. And then you can see, like, you've got parks, recreation, building, facilities, engineering. So you can see how our budget is broken out by those different expenditures. We will include, when we finalize the budget and we print a copy of the budget, we'll include these pie charts in there. As the public or somebody wants to get them, we can give them copies of that too. So that was just a quick overview on those items and kind of where we're at and why we're there. And so tonight, unless you have any other questions on the budget itself, and we're not asking for approval of the appropriations ordinance tonight. We want to continue the hearing until September 12th at 5 p.m. at our regular meeting, and then take public comment after we've had a chance to publish our notice. Any questions?
Council have questions? Mr. Rowe?
Anybody else go first?
No, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Ed, I thought you'd go.
What's this thing about going?
Just input. We have under new Public Works facility, I know that we've made one payment. Are we anticipating making a second payment for this upcoming fiscal year? And that there's a follow-up to that. If so, are we on track to execute that purchase? Or are there any roadblocks that are still before us?
When we set this up, there is one more payment that we need to make. When we went into this, we didn't think, looking at where they were at on their building, that they were going to finish their building and we would be moving in and have the requirement under the contract hit to where we had to pay that. So we were anticipating that we were going to put that second payment in our next budget. They have started, and now they're telling us it's maybe a year and a couple months out, and so it'll be close.
If they hit their contract, they will have their facility completed at the end of September, like the last week.
This September?
This coming fiscal year, a year from now.
A year
Yeah, I was
from now.
gonna say, yeah.
So probably it will not fall in this coming fiscal year, will fall in the following, more than likely. But it's going to be landing right on that time frame.
That was our best guess.
At which time we are then planning to move facilities in there.
We won't get moved in this coming fiscal year.
Well, no, but I'm talking about when they finish, let's say they do next September, immediately thereafter, we'll be prepared to roll into it.
We'll have to plan.
So my follow-up question is, are there any other roadblocks to this? Is that still existing, that roadblock, or have we cleared that up?
We did send a letter to the FAA concerning the lease agreement, and the FAA actually I spoke with Gary Gates from the FAA on two mornings ago, and he basically said, we received your letter. We will be out there at the end of August, and we will be looking at and assessing the lease agreements, I think, at the entire airport, and they're going to be going through that. And so he said, we probably won't need to provide any comment or direction at this time. They want to go through all that and then make an assessment and come back and let us know if there's any issue with that sublease.
To summarize, we don't know if we still have a problem or not.
Okay, that's all, yeah.
We're waiting for them to tell us.
All right, thank
That's a
you.
good question.
It was actually in my report.
So sorry.
Talk about that. No, it is a good time to bring it up.
Other questions or comments? In that case, oh, Mr.
No, I was going to say, I think we're going there. If there are no others, I'd go ahead and make a motion to continue the hearing to the next meeting, September 12th, and then you want direction to publish in the paper and request an extension from the county.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion from council? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Councilmember White,
Yes.
Councilmember Satterfield,
Yes.
Council President Roder,
Yes.
and Councilmember DePreez.
Yes.
Nice job on that motion, Mr. DePreez. The second, let's see, okay. It is 6:15, hearing is closed, subject to a continuance for our next meeting. Our hearing's not closed.
No, you continued it.
We have continued it till next meeting. Thank you very much. For unfinished business, item 5. First of all, we have the 2023 fee schedule update resolution. Now, council, we have just passed, as just a few moments ago, we have passed a motion to approve the fee changes. We now need to make a resolution to adopt those fee changes. Unless there is further discussion from council, I would appreciate a motion to approve the resolution adopting the 2023 fee schedule update.
As amended,
As amended.
'Cause you
Thank you
amended
very
it,
much.
yes.
As amended.
As amended, so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Council President Roder,
Yes.
Councilmember White,
Yes.
Councilmember DePreez.
Yes.
And Councilmember Satterfield.
Yes.
Our item 5, motion passes. Our item 5B will be tabled because we are continuing our budget appropriations. I'm sorry.
you'll need a motion to table.
Oh, do I need, okay, thank you. May I have a motion to table item 5B
Until September 12th.
until September 12th?
I would motion to table item 5B, the fiscal year 2024 budget appropriation ordinance to September 12th.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion from council? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Councilmember White,
Yes.
Council President Roder,
Yes.
Councilmember Satterfield,
Yes.
and Councilmember DePreez.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Item 5C, the resolution adopting the fiscal year 2024 to 28 capital improvement plan. Council, in a previous meeting, you have adopted the capital improvement plan. There are no changes to that. In light of that, would a member of council wish to make a resolution, wish to make a motion adopting a resolution for the 24 to 28 CIP?
I would make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2024 to 2028 capital improvement plan. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion from council? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember DePreez.
Yes.
Councilmember White,
Yes.
Council President Roder.
Yes.
And Councilmember Satterfield.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item 5D, a resolution adopting PZE 23-0061, the Revell LLC Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Amendment. This is the, I believe it was last council meeting that council passed that change. We now, however, need a resolution adopting it.
And you also approved the written decision in your consent calendar this evening.
And we approved the written decision. Thank you very much. May I hear a motion from council regarding the resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Council President Roder.
Thank you, Mayor. My motion is that we approve PZE 23-0061 Revell Comprehensive Plan Amendment Resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Councilmember Satterfield,
Yes.
Councilmember White,
Yes.
Councilmember DePreez.
Yes.
And Council President Roder.
Yes.
Moving along, motion passes. Moving along, item 5E, the PZE 0061 Ravel LLC Zone Map Amendment Ordinance. Oh, yes, that's right. So all city ordinances must be read on 3 different dates unless the council opts to adopt an ordinance by suspending the rules. The 4 steps required, well, there are 4 steps required to adopt suspending the rules. First of all, council, I would entertain a motion to read the ordinance by title only, to suspend the rule of reading in full on 3 separate dates, and to approve the first reading. So moved. We have a motion, we have a second, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion from council? Hearing none, roll call vote please, Abby?
Council President Roder?
Yes.
Councilmember White?
Yes.
Councilmember Satterfield?
Yes.
And Councilmember DePreez?
Yes.
This is an ordinance of the City of Hayden, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, providing for change in zoning classification for the lands described in Section 1 of this ordinance from residential suburban to light industrial, providing for amendment of the official zoning map to reflect these changes, providing that all prior zones applicable to the lands described in Section 1 are hereby superseded, providing severability, and providing an effective date. Now entertain a motion that the ordinance be adopted on its having passed its first reading by title only, and that it be published by summary, incorporating the title as the core of the summary upon passage. May I have a motion regarding that?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion from council? Hearing none, roll call vote please, Abby?
Councilmember White?
Yes.
Council President Roder?
Yes.
Councilmember DePreez?
Yes.
And Councilmember Satterfield?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item 5F, the resolution, we're doing a lot of resolutions tonight, folks. A resolution updating the official zone map. During the course of last year, since we last officially adopted the zone map, the city's approved 4 zone map amendments. However, the official zone map has not been updated. According to the memo that you folks have in your packets, the resolution we have a resolution in our packets to adopt the updated map with the approved changes of last year. There are 4 separate ordinances. Do we have discussion from council regarding this? Questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion regarding the resolution updating the official zone map.
I would make the motion, Mayor, to approve the resolution updating official zone map.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote please, Abby.
Councilmember DePreez?
Yes.
Councilmember White?
Yes.
Council President Roder?
Yes.
And Councilmember Satterfield?
Yes.
Motion passes. Well, we got through those procedural nightmares, folks. That's great. We have some reports. Mr. Boyer, you've got the city administrator report and calendar.
All right, we already covered 2 of them. The minor one this Thursday, if Susie wants to mention too, it's kind of the end of the summer activities for our group. It's the movie in the park, 8 p.m. around dusk. We have the movie in the park. It's always fun as well. So invite the public, anybody to attend there. The HARS dissolution meeting, I sent out an email to you today. Some of you got it prior. That has to do with the memo on property disposition in relation to ARBs and possibly dissolving that organization from the county and from the district. And the next meeting, just as far as process, and this is kind of for the public, will primarily be the attorneys. They meet regularly to talk about the phase two, the financing, and as part of that, we've asked them to add as a discussion point this memo on property disposition and see if they can't put some points together on a contract for dissolution and a way forward with that. And then the last part of that is, remember, it was brought up by one of you tonight, the September 29th meeting we had set back probably 5 months ago for that whole group to get back together. That's a Friday at 8:30 a.m. And that'll be next month, and to kind of see where we're at and chart the course further for dissolution of the Harps.
Here?
Harps Board. It'll be here, yeah.
We did it in the admin building last time.
We did one here as
Yeah,
well,
we did.
the last one.
I just thought there was a bigger one down there.
I kind of like the coziness, but we'll make sure that that's still okay. And then the last one related to, and I didn't know what Melissa would ask in her presentation, but we do have that letter that's outstanding from HURA asking the board to give direction on the possible expansion of the district. And I think we're going to need to have another workshop on that. For you to give direction, because that again is something that the city would need to decide yay or nay, or we're going to do something and what. So I just put that out there if you're ready for another workshop on that area. That was another item that's teed up that we need to meet and decide. So.
Ms. Roder?
I think part of that process was that HURA had to hire a consultant to look at properties that would qualify that could be included in an expansion. And my question is, should that happen before we look at how we should respond? Because without that being qualified, how can we make a decision on how to move forward? So that's my question is, when should that qualification happen? Or maybe I don't think it's happened because I haven't heard about it and I sit on the board.
My understanding is they're looking to, and we can go back and look at that letter, is they're looking to you to have an indication, do you want to move forward with an expansion of the district? Not that you have to you could give direction on and limit it for this property or these we're interested in doing for that property, and I guess they could move forward, but their letter was to get direction from the council if you would like to do something.
Mr. Mayor, I have a comment.
Ms. White?
I believe that part of the process of her moving forward is a feasibility study paid for by the city council. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the next step.
Was the feasibility study from your recollection based on, because they had on the map the green parcels that were identified, if you remember, go back to the colors on the map, identified as the proposed expansion parcels. Were you thinking possibly there was feasibility study to be done on those particular parcels that had been proposed?
That was my understanding, that the city council comes up with the proposal and pays for the feasibility study.
I think they met and they did, the engineer looked at different areas and then the engineer, the executive director, brought that back to HURA. HURA looked at that, then HURA requested to have a joint meeting with the council, and they presented what they had found with those ideas, and nothing was decided in that meeting. And then after that meeting, we received that letter from them asking for the council to give further direction. So I guess I assumed that initial work where they had their engineer look at the parcels that could be included or was desirable to be included was maybe what you're thinking of. I can go back and ask that further of them. I just was responding to the letter that we received several months ago of just asking the council to decide to give them some direction.
That was what you just described. There was kind of, I'm trying to recall it now because it's gone over a length of time here, but that they did go back and make that study of the various options of all the different parcels that they could or couldn't. And then they came back and presented to us a list, A, B, C, D, E, F, and the map and all that other stuff of properties that I think that they felt was feasible to bring into the district. But I think you said at the end there, if you could double check with them
I can.
and see if that's exactly what the deal is with that.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Roder.
Yeah, what Melissa did, and she was tasked with looking at two qualifiers. An area, you can only expand by a certain area and a certain dollar amount in appraised value. And those properties were looked at on those two questions. The other part of this is that with the identification of those possible areas on the map that were shown, is whether they qualify under the law. And that's something that has not been done, and that has to be done before we can even move forward on that, if we move forward on it. So that's why I asked the question about if I don't believe that HURA was requesting the city pay for that study. I think that's something, my understanding would be that HURA would pay for that study. So that's where I think we're at, but it would be helpful if we could get that letter, if we could send it out to all of us, and we can, maybe that'll help clarify some of this.
You should have got, it's probably a month and a half or so. It's been some time. I can resend it.
Thank you.
So that everybody can see that, and it outlined what you were talking about in that. So I'll get that information. You don't have to set a time tonight. I just, on our list of priorities, that was on there, and I just didn't, I'm just putting it forward to you to move forward with it. So I'll get that information and come back. That's all I have tonight. Updates.
Okay. So it sounds to me that we are not to the feasibility analysis point that Councilmember White is asking about.
No.
Okay, well, we'll get some clarification on that anyway. Any roundtable discussion? Anybody done anything outstanding that, Ms. White?
Yes, I have done something outstanding.
Go for it.
Well, I'd just like to say that today is the 42nd anniversary of my marriage to my husband, Alan. So I think that's outstanding, 42 years. And to commemorate it, we at the county fair today, I judged the chocolate contest. So I thought that was very fun. Also, I would like to, I've been working on a proposal to address our outdated signage for the city of Hayden, and I would like to present this proposal at the next city council meeting. On the signage, the population numbers are wrong, the signs at Finucane Park and the Farmers Market are faded, and I have some ideas that I would like to bring forward to discuss.
Maybe one update to that. We did get a bid to kind of freshen up the colors and redo the sign, the entry sign on, as you come into the business area there by the library. And we received a bid amount for a little over $3,000. And so it was within the amount that under the mayor's purview. And so we were moving forward with updating and freshening that sign because the colors are kind of faded. So that one we're moving forward with. The other, like the entry ones that we've got the money in, are going to be a little bit bigger project that we budgeted for next year.
Yes, I realized that you were working on that really pretty sign on Government Way, so I wasn't including that in the proposal.
Okay.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council members, any thoughts on having a discussion next council meeting regarding updating the sign on 95?
That's fine.
Sounds like a reasonable thing. All right, we will schedule it in. Mr. DePriest?
Yeah, I attended the ITD. They had a workshop down there on Riverstone. what is that hotel down there? Couple days ago, I guess it was. And I talked to several of their people there and asked them about the Hutter bypass, the proposed Hutter bypass. And they aren't even calling it the Hutter bypass anymore. It's got some name, Pell something or other, whatever, because the word I heard repeatedly from them is that they are looking at alternatives. And the alternative I heard the most was 53, Highway 53, up there. And I asked them, well, what stage are we in? Do we have any timeframes and years to decades? So I came away from that thinking, with the feeling that it's not high on their list, and that we're years to decades away, and that it sounds like what they are looking at more now is bringing traffic from basically the border up around north of Rathdrum and then connecting, so that it's a total bypass of basically the majority of Kootenai County. So anybody who isn't going into, who wants to go north or coming north, go into Washington, that sounds to me like what they were talking more about. But the gist of it is that it's not even called the proposed Hutter bypass anymore. They've given it some other name, and it appears to be a long time off.
Be nice if they'd share.
Any other information from council members? Mr. Roder?
Hi, thank you. I read in the paper that the U.S. Forest Service has $1 billion that can be used for protecting properties from fire. And you can apply for that. And I don't know that you have to be adjacent to Forest Service land, but I think that's something that the city ought to look into if we could provide those funds to citizens that could be used to help protect their homes. I don't know the process.
There was some criteria listed in there, and I followed up on it a bit because I thought that was interesting as well. And the money actually does come to the city. The city needs to have a wildland fire management and prevention plan and a very detailed evacuation plan. And then you submit that with an application, and the money comes to the city, and then the city can dole it out for whatever's within that plan, for private property, for public property, so I looked at that a little more as well, and there's some criteria, but they're basically begging cities to apply for those funds.
Right. And with what happened at Athol and other cities, I think it'd be prudent if we look at that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other items? At this point, we will be adjourning our council meeting. It is 6:37. We'll take a 10-minute break, and we will come back and have a workshop.
Don't adjourn.
I won't adjourn the meeting.
Do not adjourn, just take a break.
We'll take a break. Okay. We are now reconvening our meeting. We have scheduled as a workshop on the Local Land Use Planning Act related to a comprehensive plan. Ms. Fonda-Jovic.
Well, thank you very much. So we've had quite a bit of conversation, probably over the last year that I can remember, about a comprehensive plan update and what that might look like. And I think the council has done a really good job of now sort of zeroing in on maybe looking at some directed points for amending the comprehensive plan. So we thought it would be useful to do a workshop on what that will look like under the law, under your code, and then take some pivot points and not a deep dive, but a surface view at sort of comparing your previous comprehensive plan to this one as just a reminder of where you were and where you've come as you all start looking at whether or not you want to amend, how you want to amend, and start getting more specific with that. So just as a reminder, that Chapter 1 of your plan says its primary function is to define the general vision and roadmap for the city of Hayden. The plan outlines what the community what you want the community to look like in the next 20 years and how to get there. So you look at your previous and existing conditions, trends, compatibility of land uses, goals, and policies, and a desirable future situation for each planning component. So there's several planning components. And then it's periodically updated and reviewed. So that's just sort of your general guiding principles with regards to your comprehensive plan. Remember, as you start talking about your comprehensive plan and you look at your goals and policies, that the scope of the plan includes all land within the city limits and the ACI. So when you look at your comprehensive plan as a guiding principle for how you want to grow or not, or develop or not, you have to also remember that you're talking about in the city, your ACI, your area of city impact, and you have a portion of shared tier west of Hutter Road. So there's a big portion out there. Shared tier means that there's a shared tier agreement with the county, Post Falls, Rathdrum, and the city of Hayden. That shared tier doesn't guarantee it'll be Hayden that annexes or develops there, because it's really going to be first come, first serve. The plan, your comprehensive plan compiles and summarizes information such as data, maps, and reports that guide the city. And we'll talk later about how you used a consultant, but it's a very data-driven process. So there's data that informs your potential densities. There's data that informs your transportation plan that's a result of those densities. And the data is really critical because you have to rely on that when you start looking at potential growth projections and then development plans. It outlines the goals of the community and sets forth policies to attain your goals based on the analysis of current physical, economic, environmental, and social conditions. And I want to emphasize here Idaho Code 67-6508, and I even printed it off because I never can remember all of the categories that are required to go into a comprehensive plan. But right out of the gate, you have to address personal private property rights, population, school facilities and transportation, economic development, land use, and land use includes different natural landscapes, existing land covers and uses, open space. It's got a broad definition of all different land uses. It can't be just focused on residential. Natural resources, whether you have any in the area or not, and what might need protected. Hazardous areas, public services, transportation, recreation, special areas or sites, if you have any special architectural or archaeological or historical areas that you want to preserve or protect, you identify that. Housing is critical. The code specifically says you're required to have a variety of housing. You're to plan for a variety of housing. Community design, how do all those different parts and pieces in your minds fit together for the development and beautification of your city? Agriculture And then an implementation section. It's great to talk about all these things, but how are we going to implement our goals and policies? National interest electric transmission corridors. I think that is the strangest category, but you're required because you could have a gas, a main gas pipeline running through the city. You can have main transmission corridors running through your city. So you have to have a chapter that addresses that. And then last is public airport facilities, which we also deal with here. So your comprehensive plan you're required by code to address all of those chapters and have goals and policies and plans related to all of those chapters. So then the plan is a projection of how, when you look at your data and your goals, how you're going to apply your policies and then follow up with code to make those things happen. We'll kind of dive quickly into the amendment of the comprehensive plan process. So you've seen in front of you several different requests from particular property owners to amend the comprehensive plan, the future land use map, so that they can also get a zone map amendment approved. So that they're going to 1117 when they start looking down that road of usually a zone map amendment to whether or not they need a context or a comprehensive plan amendment first. And you've seen a few of those. So 1117 is your code section. And we're going to talk more in detail later about the public hearing process. So I'm not going to settle on it here. Oh, and here it is, and I'm sorry, it's really super small, but that's because there's a lot. So there are similarities between a city-initiated comprehensive plan amendment process, and then and an individual applicant, and then there are differences. So this square right here involves all the similarities. So if you have an individual applicant that is applying for a comprehensive plan amendment so that they can get a zone map amendment, all of these things happen. So they come in and they meet with staff and they go through they go through all the issues related to their parcel. And then staff takes that information and they put it together into a planning and zoning presentation. Then that goes to a planning and zoning public hearing. Then planning and zoning issues they make a decision, and then out of that comes a written recommendation. Then that written recommendation comes back at the next meeting for approval by planning and zoning. So that's before it ever gets even remotely close to here. Then there's a memorandum done for the city council. And then that will include the entire planning and zoning packet, plus the memorandum from city staff. Then city staff comes and they do a presentation to city council, and you have a public hearing here with the applicant. Then it goes again, then a written decision comes out of that. So you have your deliberations, you make a decision. Then Donna and her staff put that together in the form of a written decision. Then that comes back to you for approval and a resolution. You saw that tonight, so that process is not foreign to you. And then the maps get amended. You saw that tonight too. So all of those things happen in the context of an applicant proposal. But I'm sorry, these were out of order, so I'm going to jump ahead. But if it's a city-initiated comprehensive plan amendment, everything in this square happens before anything in that previous square. So you're going to have pre-workshop meetings, which you've kind of already started. You are going to have studies, data studies, because you have to know, one, you have to have a reasonably recognized data set for proposed population growth to help identify how that's going to affect your transportation master plan, your sewer master plan, and your parks master plan. Okay, I'll pause right there. Go ahead.
Are these statutorily required?
Are what statutorily required?
The studies in each of those?
Yes, the Local Land Use Planning Act and the comprehensive planning statutes speak to the studies. Yes.
They're required, as you say, to have them by an impartial or whatever recognized.
It doesn't say it that clearly, no.
Okay.
I will, it does not say it that clearly.
Okay.
And then you go to public open house and some more workshops with the public, and then you start providing notices and outreach, then you have more open houses, and then your city council, maybe at this point, likely at this point, with a workshop with planning and zoning, can start wrangling kind of where you might want these amendments to occur. And then right at the bottom, right there, where it says staff review and recommendation, it starts that whole other process. Oh, the backwards button doesn't work. It starts the whole other process over again that we looked at before, which is then planning and zoning, a decision, a written decision, and you go all the way through that process. So the Idaho code, oh, I have to stand when I speak most of the time. So Idaho code requires one public hearing at planning and zoning, but does not require a second public hearing at city council unless there's going to be a substantive change recommended by planning and zoning after their public hearing. But you've built into your code for there to be a second public hearing. So you're going to have two no matter what. So when we start, perfect segue. So when we start that public hearing process, we're noticing at P&Z, we're taking it to P&Z, they're making a decision, they're making a recommendation, and then it comes to you, and we're noticing again, and then it's coming to a second public hearing in front of you. If you, at this level, decide you want to make significant changes to what's been recommended by planning and zoning, 90% of the time, you're going to need another hearing after that. And 90% of the time, I will recommend, if you're making bigger changes, that it go back to planning and zoning for another recommendation up from them. So you could go through this process a couple of times to land on what you believe is actually what the public wants or what you think is driven by the data, because it's just how the process works. So I just want to make sure everybody's really clear as we talk about these comprehensive plan amendments, that it's not just, we just bring it to council, we have a public hearing and it's done there. Any questions on this part of the process? I figured you had.
You did? Yeah, that's why you're looking at me. So help me if I'm not understanding correctly. This originates in P&Z.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Can the council require P&Z to bring forth anything?
You can make recommendations to council as to what, or you can make recommendations to planning and zoning as to what you'd like, what areas you'd like them to focus on, but you can't require anything.
But if they were to look at it and go, well, we think it's fine, the council could
The
not.
recommendation to you would be not to amend the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
Yes.
Could you go to your very first slide?
Yeah, sure.
You said your back button.
Yeah, Donna's clicking the back button for me, but thank you.
That's the one, there we go. No, the very.
Back one more.
The very first.
Right there.
Okay, what kind of caught my, my thought process here? In the second sentence, it says, it outlines what the community wants to look like in the next 20 years. So I guess my question is, in looking at this process, you have the law, then you have the community, what we believe based on our survey that the community wants. Will the law always overrule what the community wants?
So let's talk a little bit about that concept, because you have a law sandwich, right? We have the Local Land Use Planning Act, which is state code that says we must plan with a comprehensive plan. And then you get community feedback and you, in theory, develop a plan that reflects what the community wants. And then that comprehensive plan guides your code. And that's what you did this last time. You cleaned up, and we're going to get to a couple of those slides. You cleaned up areas of development and what's community design and design standards that was in your comprehensive plan before, and you moved it to your code, which is where it should be. So you have state code, and then you have your comprehensive plan, and then you have your city code that is your city law. That's why I called it a law sandwich, because your comprehensive plan is kind of in the middle of those two pieces.
So let me be more specific with my question. Say the community says, we only want single-family residents on large lots. But the code, the state law says you must provide a
Variety of housing.
variety of houses. So which takes precedence?
State law.
So it doesn't matter if the people of Hayden say, we don't want apartments that are 1,000 or what I'm being, I'm
Yeah,
saying.
you're just making an
And the community
example.
says, we don't want that, but if the law says we do have to provide a variety, forget it.
Well, they
So
don't,
really-
they
really-
don't dictate how many. And that's the whole, that's the whole thing, at least in my opinion, is what planning and zoning, and we are tasked with, is coming up with a reasonable number of variety. Are we gonna need X to the 10th power of this
And this,
versus that?
I'll pause you for 1 second if you don't mind, only because this workshop, well, this presentation is designed just to kind of walk you through the process.
Right.
If we have time and you want to dive in a little more, just to more discussion points, we certainly can do that. But let's get through the process piece so everybody's really clear on what it takes, and then we'll go from there. Is that fair? I think we're at you get adopted by resolution. So there's one important piece here, and we're going to hit it a little bit later also. Any individual can petition Planning and Zoning Commission, I'm pointing at you because you're here, sorry about that, can petition the Planning and Zoning Commission for a plan amendment. So that's another piece that sort of gets lost in the shuffle of our conversations. There's a provision in your code as well as Idaho code where individuals can petition. If they want to petition for an amendment, the burden of the cost falls on them. So let's be clear there, but it's not just the planning and zoning that has to initiate a comprehensive plan amendment, which is why individual property owners can apply for a comprehensive plan amendment specific to the future land use map. We
Since
can
this
skip
is a
past
city
that one.
council meeting, are citizens allowed to ask questions?
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's a workshop, but thank you.
Or workshop, I guess, yeah, thank you.
So also in keeping in mind, we've hit on this before, if there are changes made to the comprehensive plan that are made based on different data, or that second little arrow there says assumptions, that's what we call them. You have to make some assumptions to do your planning. And so if your requested amendments are the result of changing the assumptions on density, changing the assumptions on transportation, changing the assumptions on population growth, then that can impact all of your plans. So your sewer master plan, your park master plan, your transportation master plan, and all of that can impact money that you have available for required infrastructure. So let's not forget your comprehensive plan information is what feeds into your master plans. Your master plans are what allow you to set impact fees so that growth pays for growth. And if you affect those assumptions and you affect those plans such that you take those assumptions backwards, then you essentially affected the master plan that has fed your impact fees, and then all of that has to be reassessed. So it's like a nasty domino effect. And I just want you to remember that and be aware, not that there are places to make adjustments, just if you make if planning and zoning were to come forward with some very drastic adjustments, we would be talking to city council at that point about whether assumptions were changed and whether or not master plans need to be changed, because you're in the $50,000 to $200,000 range to get that done at that point. Yes, sir.
Question.
Yes.
Campio had originally estimated it was 36,000 people by 2040. They've since reduced that into 28,000, which is a pretty significant change. So my question is, when is there enough significant change in an assumption? Because that's an assumption.
Yeah.
But we're basing our whole comprehensive plan on Campio's assumption. How much of a change that qualifies that we should change our comprehensive plan?
So that's generally a great question. When you have a drastic reduction in an assumption like that, to send back to the consultant and say, hey, if, and you don't want to do that?
No, that's not a correct sentence.
I'm sorry.
No, his sentence isn't a correct
Yes.
sentence. So
Okay.
The assumptions for the future land use map are not based on population. The
Okay.
assumptions of the future land use map are based on where the citizenry and the workshops and the public,
I think he's talking, yes.
but that's what created that. It's not based on a
I'm talking about the comp
future
plan.
population. I understand that. Go ahead.
Okay, so and we can dive into those specifics later, and all I'm getting at is just the impact of the dominoes one on the other, depending on what is recommended to be changed. And the future land use map, as I indicated just kind of briefly in one sentence at the end of your last workshop, the future land use map is the physical, visual manifestation of the information in your comprehensive plan. I thought I brought the code section. The future land use map is actually one sentence in the Local Land Use Planning Act that just says you shall have a map that reflects the information in your comprehensive plan. So it is not, we tend to be looking at this backwards. The comprehensive plan feeds what you see on the future land use map, not vice versa. Does that make sense? There, I think I might have corrected what you were saying too.
Yeah, and the growth rate is not, the map is not driven out of a growth rate.
That's correct. The map is not driven out of the growth rate. You're right. The assumptions in some of the plans and the information in the comprehensive plan is, but the map is not.
Correct.
So we have localized amendments. So when we talk about localized, within city limits, we have existing property zone in accordance with the city zone map. We have zone map amendment requests that are heard on a per property basis. And we have costs associated with the process and technical memos paid for by the requester. So within city limits, that's what happens. Areas within the city impact, existing properties are zoned in accordance with the county zone map, not ours. And then the zone map amendment request heard on a per property basis at the request of the property owner happens at annexation time, and then the costs associated with the process and the technical memos are paid by the requester. So just keeping in mind that the zones outside of the city boundaries are county zones, not our zones. We zone those properties at the time of annexation. And then if there's a city, so localized amendments are being asked for by a property owner. City-initiated amendments are what we've been talking about collectively. And so when you have proposed changes identified by the city, they're usually coming forth with a technical memo. So the technical memo could be related to a transportation change. A technical memo could be related to a population shift. And that's when we start that process we looked at before with the public open house and the special workshops. The proposed changes to the comprehensive plan and our text, how it affects the other long-range plans. We start the public noticing and the public hearing and the whole process. And all those costs are borne by the city. So unlike the localized amendments where they're property specific, borne by the requester, these costs are all borne by the city. I think we've talked about this enough before, but I'll just hit on it. So it is the comprehensive plan is not legally controlling zone law. So it is a guiding plan developed by the city for how you want your city to develop over time, generally looking out 20 years. It's to serve to guide and advise, and it guides most often in the instance of zoning decisions. Your zoning code is your zoning law. It reflects your permitted uses, it reflects your design standards, and that is what you have to rely on. Oftentimes, we'll say it's either in code or it's out of code. Your comprehensive plan speaks to your zoning code, but your zoning code is the law. 6508 mandates that the plan shall consider previous and existing conditions, trends, desirable goals and objectives, and desirable future situations for each planning component. So that was on page 1 of our presentation. It's directly right out of code. This is my cue to dive out. Do you guys have any questions for me? Donna's going to go into a more of an explanation of where you were on your comprehensive plan before the previous one versus this one, and then some other details. Yes.
I have a question. So I've been looking at the local land use planning map. And.
Wait, you said planning map.
I'm sorry, the planning, the LUPA
Okay, good, thank you.
statutes.
Just to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Thank you. So I've been looking at that, and my question is, there's like 16, 17 different items that need to be considered. So if our comprehensive plan, does it need to consider all of those 16, 17 items?
Yeah, and you're talking about the ones that I read out of 676508?
Yes.
Yes, your comprehensive plan, if it's applicable to your city, addresses each chapter of your comprehensive plan addresses one of these topics. Yes.
Okay, so, for example, like special areas or sites, an analysis of areas or sites or things like that, that needs to also be in our comprehensive plan.
You either identify it or you say you have none that apply.
Okay. All right. So I would need to look back in our comprehensive plan at these, now that I'm hearing this, I need to look back at our comprehensive plan and see where these items.
Donna knows it inside out and backwards. She can probably tell you.
The components are in a third page under before the goals and policies, and it addresses in the goals and policies which ones of those 17 areas are being addressed by those goals and policies. So that will point you to which chapters are.
Okay,
also
where's that at
addressed.
again?
I can show it to you
Okay, thank you.
after the meeting in the comp plan. more?
I think that was it.
Okay. Oh, you're not
There's
done.
this process.
So at the last workshop, Councilmember White brought up the previous comprehensive plan. The previous comprehensive plan, future land use map, well, actually, the previous comprehensive plan had two maps used in concert together. One of them was a future land use map that has a lot of yellow on it, and then it has varying degrees of reds and grays. And it has a residential densities map. The residential densities map was used in concert with the future land use map to establish densities throughout the city. So all of the areas that are in green had an average over the entire area of 4 dwelling units per acre, maximum. The yellow all had a maximum density of 7 dwelling units per acre, 7 dwelling units per acre, average. And the red or pink has an average of, at the high end, of 12 dwelling units per acre. And in 2020, when we talked about this previously, we took all of the dwelling units citywide at that point in time in 2020, and citywide, not including the airport, just the ACI minus the airport area. And that was less than 1 dwelling unit per acre across the city. So if you had a project that came forward and was requesting higher densities in like the residential multifamily zones or in commercial, which was allowing for higher densities through multifamily in the commercial zones, and your average density in your area was 12 or 7 or 4, the argument was you're nowhere near that now. So if we want a little bit higher density, it should be okay. Then the answer from the attorneys, when they were asked that question about density in the comprehensive plan, was that comprehensive plan is a
Guiding document.
and not law. And so that's how you ended up with projects that came in that were higher density than the maximums that were in those zone areas.
Could I ask a question? The 2019 map, since it all shows yellow, led me to believe that everything there was single-family residential.
No.
It was not. And so if you look at the, go ahead.
But what you're telling us is that on the map on the right, in the 2019 plan, everything in yellow there can be 7 units per acre, 4 to 7 units per acre?
depending on what it was under, if it had a zone that would allow for those higher densities, that's correct.
And everything in pink in the 2019 plan allowed up to 12 units per acre.
That's correct.
That is hugely larger than what we currently allow.
That's correct.
Okay, go ahead.
So if you look, flip the page over in the previous comprehensive plan, it gave you a land use map legend, which is why I pointed out that the future land use map is about future land uses, not zoning categories. Previously, they had definitions of uses that may or may not be in concert with any of the zones that would be approvable. So that's why that it was a real disconnect, and that's why we made the land uses as part of the 2019 plan match the zone categories, was to avoid that confusion of, well, how this future land use map allows for this, how come I can't get it to be here? And so it was just very confusing. So then down here in residential, it identifies under residential areas where a variety of residential types and densities are allowed, ranging from larger lots to higher densities, as based upon the residential densities map. So that goes back to your sentence that those areas of yellow, specifically where there's all that residential in yellow, that those densities align with this map. And then also up here in the central business district, it identifies the promoting a mixture of activities, including residential uses on upper floors of multi-story buildings in the district and community activity centers. It's important to note that at the point of this, that the commercial at that point in time allowed for residential multifamily, but in nowhere in the land use categories of the future land use map are those uses of multifamily identified in those categories here. So it was a real disconnect that was occurring between the zone and the land uses identified in the future land use map.
Are there any questions on that? Because
Yeah, maybe. Can we go back to that? So if I understood you correctly here, if we're looking at general commercial and what you previously said, there are no really strict restrictions or maximum dwelling units per acre.
Because in general commercial, as it was envisioned on this map, general commercial did not have a multifamily component. However, in our code at that point in time, that was the only place you could have multifamily. There was a disconnect.
So someone could come in and say, I have this project, it's in your general commercial, I want multifamily, here it is, and hypothetically, it could be 15, 20 dwelling units per acre.
And they could request that because it meets the residential densities map. But if you're looking at future land use, as you're trying to look at those things, that's why comprehensive plans have disconnects, is because it might work here and not there, but it puts them in conflict points. So part of what we tried to do as a consultant and as staff and as council and future past citizens is try to remove as many inconsistencies in the documents as we move forward to the new plan.
And part of that was just using the same language and the same terminology in the future land use map as was being used in the zone text.
Correct. One more thing I wanted to point out is at the very bottom of this, it says, please note the boundaries delineating types of uses are not finite, but outline a general area for designated activities. Boundary lines for types of uses are generally within a 300 plus or minus foot of delineating the proposed area. So then going back here to this map, go 300 feet either way. You could expand those commercial, light industrial areas by 300 feet or the residential. Just get that flexibility, which was sometimes good and sometimes bad.
I have a question.
Yes,
Does
ma'am.
that same rule apply to the current future land use map?
It could. I mean, it's not I wouldn't say it's a 300-foot flex, but there's no, I mean, there could be a situation where somebody says, I can't tell exactly what I am on the future land use map, where I'm between two land use designations.
Because the way I look at the future land use map right now, it's pretty delineated. It's pretty straight lines covering neighborhoods. I don't see that.
I think that the goal was for it to really give delineated future land uses on it, and to try to make sure every parcel knew what it was today and what it could be in the future. But, you know, it's not perfect, so, and it's not identified by legal description, so, or parcel number.
Can you elaborate on what you just said?
Yeah, so like there isn't anywhere in a recorded document that says parcel, you know, block 2, parcel 3 of such and such subdivision is identified as such on the future land use map.
Okay.
Whereas you have a zone designation.
Okay, thank you.
So then the flip side of the residential densities map gave a legend to the residential densities, and it identified that the average density of 1 to 4 dwelling units per acre, medium 4 to 7 dwelling units per acre, and high density with an average density of 7 to 12 dwelling units per acre. And then it had 2 notes. One of them was in relationship to the transportation corridor and various transportation pieces requiring to be installed. And then the second one was that if you wanted a mid-range or higher density, that you had to include some design standards. You needed to dedicate public space, you had to have common areas and park facilities with connected green spaces between developments. You needed to have a quality of development, design features, and architectural styles. You needed to have clustered development or mixed-use concepts, provision of affordable housing and or a variety of housing types, and adequacy of transportation network with an emphasis on connectivity and walkability. So what we did is we took those design standards, and those where you will see bits and pieces of those design standards mixed into the new zones that we created, which were mixed residential as well as mixed use. And you'll see those throughout that. You'll also see that connected green space between developments. We have language in both our transportation plan and in our parks plan that the code points back to that requires that connectivity, that greenway to connect schools and to connect parks. And then transportation is identified throughout all of our transportation plans and those transportation networks. And pedestrian connectivity is part of both parks and transportation. So that's, you took all of those components as well as all of our workshops, public outreach, and the future land use map was created. This is a snapshot of a previous slide when mixed residential was orange before we changed it to blue to help with folks that had challenges with colors. And the percentages over here are the percentages in acres of land of each of those types. We took density out of the comprehensive plan, so it doesn't exist. It talks about what those land uses look like, but the density piece is not in the comprehensive plan. So as we said, the 2008 residential densities were in the comp plan and they were in a guide, and that's not law. We took them out of that and we put them into the code. So now they're law and not a guide. And we just talked about the fact that we moved the densities from the comprehensive plan and into the law. We talk about all of these requirements in the comprehensive plan, but we added them to the law so that they're required that if you build in this certain fashion, you have to build the way we want it to get built.
Because the comprehensive plan didn't give the teeth that council wanted to force these requirements. It had to be in code.
Correct. So what did that do to the kind of the overall assumptions? Is if you apply those residential densities of that pink map, the pink and the yellow and the green on the future land use map that existed in 2019, and you multiply each of those acreages by the maximum amount, you could get to just about 50,000 dwelling units. In order to develop, you'd have to have the correct zone designation. You could develop under allowed uses that are in that zone designation or conditional use permits. But the density was defined as an average across, and it was a guide. Using the future land use map that was adopted by the city council in 2020, and applying that same logic to the acreages and keeping in mind that the acreages are larger in the second map because we include the shared tier in that ACI. And we also include the airport, although there are no houses in the airport, but I'm just saying that that acreage is all included in that whole future land use map. And recognizing that not all of the mixed use is going to develop with multifamily. You get to about 35,000 dwelling units. The only way to get to multifamily is not through a conditional use permit, but to get to a zone map amendment to a mixed use piece of property that would allow you to build in multifamily. So that's different. And so density is defined by and reviewed on a per project area, and that's in code. So it's not an average over all of the whatever, it's what's happening on your acreage and how you can get that to build. Which significantly, I mean, it just does. Questions?
I have some questions. I have some questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, going back to the 2009 map,
That one?
one more.
Those
Okay,
ones?
so how many of these properties, like the 4 to 7 per acre, were those by right or conditional use permits?
Those are based on whatever their underlying zone allowed for. Just like, I mean, if they came in with a subdivision, like Stinson Estates, for example, and wanted to put in higher density in their residential multifamily, as long as they were under that 7 dwelling units per acre, they could do so.
So it wasn't conditional use, it was by right?
It's allowed outright under the subdivision as long as they met the intent of the comprehensive plan. So it was intended to be residential, and it was less than the 7 dwelling units per acre.
So the subdivision didn't have to come for like a special use of any kind?
Did not know. Whereas today, if somebody wanted to develop in a residential zone, they would, if they were in a single family residential zone, they would have to have minimum lot sizes of 8,250 square feet. And if they wanted to develop in mixed residential, they couldn't have any more than 8 dwelling units per acre. If they wanted to develop in residential suburban, they'd have to have a minimum lot size of half an acre. And if they wanted to develop in mixed use, then they would have a maximum of 12 if they could get it to fit with all the other design standards that are required in mixed use. If they wanted increases more than that, they'd have to meet those design standards in order to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Don, is this the end of your presentation?
It is.
Are we ready to kind of go to open questions or discussion, I guess?
I will tell you, I mean, yes, I think you can go to questions, no problem, but this is designed for process questions.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
I'm trying to understand a couple things here, the process, because the discussion is really, as came out of the last workshop we had. I made a presentation, Councilmember White got up and said she didn't like it, which is fine, that she wanted to basically go back to the 2019 plan. So that's kind of the process question, and maybe, is it feasible? What is all involved here? And I guess my question is, if we said, okay, we want to go back to 2019, number one, it would have to come out of planning and zoning, okay? Number two, they would probably have to go through all of the studies and what have you again that are part of 2019 and basically have to redo
Data-driven decision making.
all of that data. And as the mayor, I think, hit it on the head, and this has been discussed here, I see 50,000 versus 35,000 when we talk about dwelling units. I think that's a topic of discussion, but also would going back to that one down zone anybody from what they are currently on the zone map?
Well, so your future land use map is not adjusting your underlying zones. Remember, it's land uses.
Okay,
So that's different.
if you went back to the comprehensive plan and the zone map, would any of those properties that are allowable on that zone map down zone any that are on the current zone map, not future land use map?
So remember, you don't have, you would be unwinding all of your code right now to go back to the previous
Right.
map. Not that it's not doable.
But it's another part of the process. Unwind everything and replace with what used to at that point in time, basically. Yeah.
And your future land use types don't have to be the same as your current zone
Right.
designations.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was an attempt this last time to have consistency in terminology, which may have ultimately caused more confusion that was intended. I mean, I have other cities that I work for where they have context areas on their future land use map, and then their definition of their context area says, within this context area, it's anticipated to have, mixed use or mixed residential or single family or commercial, whatever, but they don't, the titles of the different colors on the future land use map are not titled the same as the zones. And so I think that is what has caused some confusion here. Because they are different, they're land uses and they're how do you intend, what do you see these land uses being in this particular area 15 to 20 years from now? They're not intended to be you are this right now and only gonna be this forever, and it's not your zone, it's land uses, that's the difference.
Question. We have, the council here has changed the land use, the future, no, I guess that's not true. We have not changed the future land use map. We have changed zones from less dense to greater density. But that is done not within the context of the comprehensive plan, is it? That's
in your
strictly a
zone
zoning
text,
decision.
in your code.
I guess what I'm wondering is, at what point do we hit I'll back up a bit. Some members of council and myself have suggested that some future land use designations are perhaps not appropriate for particular areas in town here. What is I'll rephrase that. Can you give us some guidance on what is the threshold that suddenly we have to kick in a whole bunch of studies to make this work? Is that is it a complaint-driven system? In other words, if nobody complains, are we good to go?
There's no way we could tell you the threshold of that. What we can tell you is that the adjustments speak to, and Donna can probably explain this better, speak to what happens with transportation in that area with the adjustment you've made. Does it adjust the assumptions for sewer and sewer planning? So no way could we tell you the threshold, but it would speak, they would have to take a hard look at whether that adjustment affects any of those other planning tools.
Very similar to what we did with the last comp plan map amendment. You saw that we went to the sewer model and looked at what the flow generated thought was going to happen on that piece of property, and if it moved to a different land use category, what effect would it have on that sewer that would be generated? And the same thing that we did with the transportation analysis as well. It's much easier to do on a project by project basis because it's very finite. But if you start taking huge swaths out of the conversation, then it has big effects. And if you go down when you really should have stayed up, it has really highly costly consequential effects in the future. Because putting in another sewer line after you've already paved a road is.
Make Alan pull his hair out.
I mean, as an example.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I want to, it's not necessarily a question, it's to make sure I'm understanding what we're talking about. What I'm hearing is that it is a living document, the comprehensive plan, but it's a very complex process to make any significant changes to it. Because it has to go clean P and Z, and we have to go through all these steps. So it is a document can be changed, which the law allows for, but it seems like it's a very difficult process to go through, which then brings up the question of how long does without knowing what you want to change, but say we have a 20% change of the comprehensive plan to do all the studies and to do all the data, are we talking about a year?
Yes.
Are we talking about 2 years? I mean, I know it's hard to know, but if the process is really complex, it means it's going to take a lot of time. And what should we be thinking about as far as how long this process could take if we want to undergo it? I'm just talking, thinking out loud here. The other part that I want to make a point on, because I did hear this at the Idaho Association of Cities, is that Blue Cross Blue Shield has grant money for cities that want to make changes to their comp plan. So the cost factor in here could be offset if the council decided to make changes to the comp plan that would have less impact to the cities fiscally, that I think it would be prudent for us to at least explore this grant or these grants from Blue Cross Blue Shield. It was real clear to me, one of the cities said they got a $50,000 grant to do either a full comp plan because it's a small city or an amendment. I don't remember.
I will add to that, they're prioritizing the distribution of those funds based on how long ago the city's comp plan has been amended. So the cities that are 10 years or older since they've had an amendment have a higher priority, and they are distributing by priority based on time.
Because what I'm hearing too is that this is really expensive, and do we want to go there? I mean, those are huge questions. Do you want to go there and change it all or change some portion of it? And it's a long process. And if we're going to go down that road, I think we need, as in our workshop, we need to discuss that in detail.
I have another question.
And I want to follow up on that. I don't think that the message here is that any and or all changes you may want to make or that planning and zoning would recommend are expensive. We just want you to be mindful of, because there's probably some small adjustments you could make that we have no idea what the impact to that adjustment would be without checking on it and doing the data checking. But it's that the farther you go in and the more changes you start looking at, the higher risk of it being more expensive. So.
Is it possible for us to make changes to density based on city code? For example, right now, mixed use allows for up to 15 units per
12, up to 15 with goodies.
Up to 15 per acre. Can we change city code to simply say 12 per acre, period?
We would need to explore that because you've downzoned already in relatively short period of time ago, and you start downzoning further or reducing density opportunities even further, and you do run the risk of takings claims.
Yeah, something that I've been looking at, and people bring this up, and they say, oh, you're facilitating all this. And it's the community development annual metrics, which we get monthly, and the building trends. In 2020, there were 112 residential multifamily mixed-use permits. 2021, there were 72. 2022, there were 0. And 23 to date, there were 0. So in the last 18, 20 months, whatever this is by now, there have been 0 permits issued for this higher density stuff. And I know we have to be careful, but I've spoken with developers, engineers, and things like that. And they discuss the fact that our current situation and requirements are probably the reason why we have 0 building permits for the higher density, mixed use, multifamily stuff, since basically we started making the changes. I don't think it's any coincidence, 20 months ago. So I think that we are better managing what we have here based on what we're hearing from the people without really having to go into this in-depth, deep process that we're talking about here.
To get back to the plan, what should our next step be should we decide we want to continue to pursue this? I realize it has to go through planning and zoning, but I'm assuming we don't have to have studies before we get together with planning and zoning to see what we might like to do.
Well, we had suggested to you at the end of the last workshop to go through the goals and policies and identify any goals and policies that you think you would like to see amended. I mean, that's where it starts, is on your goals and policies.
Okay.
So I would start there.
So when assuming we've gone through some of those goals and policies, and we have some things that we think we might like to change, where do we go with that?
We have to workshop it again.
Okay, so then we have a workshop with P and Z?
No, because we haven't caught P and Z up to speed yet on the survey. We haven't had a meeting to catch them up to speed on the survey results or any of these conversations.
So then we as council need to come up with potential changes to the goals and policies.
Or I would, yes.
You would what?
I would say goals and policies you'd like to discuss, because it's not guaranteed that everybody's going to agree to make a recommendation for a change, but goals and policies that you see an issue with that you'd like to discuss the implications.
And then from that point, our next step is to involve P and Z.
Yep.
Okay.
Who by that time would most likely
But then
be brought up to
we would
date
have
on
them
that.
caught up at that
Is
point.
that on their next meeting's agenda?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. White.
What about a workshop or something between now and talking about goals and policies where citizens could come and express what they think as well?
Do we involve the general citizenry right now? Would you?
Or a town hall.
suggest,
Town hall.
A town hall opportunity generally occurs after you have a workshop with P and Z, and now it's kind of put on their plate. Because the public needs to speak to them, that's where it needs to go. And so after you workshop with them, and if there's a consensus to send it down to P and Z for evaluation, that's when you would town hall and start getting your public input.
Okay.
So I would just like to ask, go ahead.
Mr. Priest.
No, I mean, and again, it's just me, but I think we got a significant and valid response from the people with our survey. I know I came away, basically, they're concerned about growth, density, and traffic, and they do want a to some degree, a variety of housing type of thing. And again, it gets back to kind of what I said about the beginning with the local land use requiring a variety. It doesn't, the law doesn't say you have to have XXX. And I mean, if we could come up with B and Z and everything and come to a plan to say, okay, here's what we want to do. And at that point, if we then want to have the open house and bring the people in and say, here's our ideas, what do you think? Because I think to have it now and have what would really be a select group of people type of thing come in and say this, and this, I think that however many we had, 1,200, whatever responses to it, is far more than we're going to get show up at a town hall.
So, and remember, you conducted the survey for the purpose of getting public feedback to drive your decision on the comprehensive plan. So sit with those survey results and your goals and policies side by side and see if, in your opinion, you have goals and policies that are inconsistent with what you received as results in that survey.
Right.
Mr. Rowe. Yeah, legal question. Who's in control, P&Z or the council on changes?
Council makes the ultimate decision, but it starts with P&Z.
But if they don't initiate what we'd like, they're still in control.
Well, under the code, it's their process. Under the Local Land Use Planning Act, it is your planning and zoning
So we're putting the future
commissions.
in their hands, non-elected folks.
Appointed by the
Right,
mayor.
but non-elected.
Yep. No, the legislature did that with the code. But you're correct.
I just want to make sure I understand the process.
Yep.
That's what we're talking about. So.
Yep.
Ms. White, did you have something else? I thought I saw that.
I was just gonna say, I need to digest this and mull it over. I want to watch this a couple of times and learn from it, and so,
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
agree. I think that will be valuable. If council so chooses, after having a little bit of time to digest this, I think that a council workshop would be in order to take a look at the goals and policies and the citizen survey and kind of rewind to where we maybe should have started at the beginning.
Absolutely.
Brett, is it okay if they have goals and policies that they'd like to look at in this workshop they want to have? If they could email them to you, and then we could assemble them in a PowerPoint or have them up here available so we could all look at them.
There aren't that, I've gone through them already, and at least, again, in my evaluation, there aren't that many that specifically apply to changes to what we're talking about.
You could email them to Brett or.
Yeah.
But there could be additions to ones that, not just changes.
I mean,
Could be
Correct.
additional goals and policies.
That's the other part.
yeah.
Okay.
Do you have an idea, timing wise? I mean, are we shooting for the next meeting to do the workshop, or in 2 meetings, or do you have a thought on that?
Council, how do you feel about a workshop for the next meeting,
We need to have a
regular council meeting?
I'm good.
next meeting.
Yes.
I might need a little more time,
How much more time?
maybe one more meeting.
Give me days. How many more days before 2 more weeks?
I've got to pour all these things. Let's see.
It's when-
I think we have that extra week.
we have an extra week, okay.
We do have 3 weeks. so
We have 3 weeks then. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
3 weeks? That's the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay. We'll
What
plan on
time? What time for the workshop?
it. Prior to the next meeting? Prior to the next regular meeting?
Is it
With-
3
with
o'clock, 4
pizza.
o'clock?
Oh.
Noon.
Hey,
What, are we talking about
we
the
get paid
12th?
Yes.
in
We
pizza.
have to have executive session before the meeting on the 12th.
How long do you think it'll take?
40 minutes? half an hour,
Oh,
45 minutes?
that's, I don't know what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
We need to have an executive session, probably before the next meeting, as well. She's saying 40, 45
For the
minutes.
next meeting?
Mhm.
Okay.
Why don't when?
Why don't we do the workshop after?
Do the workshop after the meeting?
Okay.
Like we're doing now?
Yeah. So then we would set 4 o'clock for executive
4
session?
o'clock for an executive session, then the regular meeting at
On the-
5,
on the
and then the
12th?
workshop to
Yes.
follow?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Any other questions or comments? Motion to adjourn? So moved. Done. All right.